So I just thought I'd start with a few key facts about easyJet, just so you know who we are. We are the UK's biggest airline, not British Airways, it's us. We fly 64 million passengers a year. We fill our planes, we're 90% full, and we do that on 225 aircraft right across Europe. We actually fly to more of Europe's top 100 airports than any other airline across Europe. That's 700 routes, more than 32 countries. And we're the #1 airline in Gatwick. We're about 50% of all flights by volume of customers out of Gatwick. In Milan, in Geneva, we're #2 in Paris, in Rome, in Berlin. So we've got a big, wide European footprint, about 9,000 staff and about 300 million people. Now, I've been at easyJet for just over 3.5 years now. And when I joined, it was an organisation that did face some challenges, and Carolyn McCall was putting together a change programme that perhaps some of you may know a little bit about. And I think one of the things that I observed when I first got there is a lot of people thought that we kind of wanted to be a bit like British Airways. I'm not going to be rude about you all night, Abby, I promise. But about British Airways, like Lufthansa, like some of the big flag carriers. And the truth is that we really don't. We want to have a very, very different model. And I think it was really summed up by Warren Buffett, who had a great quote, and I must read it out. He said, "The worst sort of business is one that grows rapidly, requires significant capital to engender the growth, and then earns little or no money. Think airlines. Here, a durable competitive advantage has proven elusive ever since the days of the Wright brothers. Indeed, if a far-sighted capitalist had been present at Kitty Hawk, he would have done his successors a huge favour by shooting Orville down." So there is no industry really that has destroyed more shareholder value than airlines. And if we look at our profit performance over the last 2 years, we've gone from 6.6% to 9.3%. That compares with an industry average at the same time as 1.1 to 1.8. So we do things very differently, and we want to do things very differently, and that's kind of important. And my presentation today is kind of just about the approach we take, because it isn't really complicated. It is all about what I call simple marketing. So what I've found when I got to easyJet is that I think everybody knows we're sort of efficient, we're low cost, we're no frills. But it was actually the relentless obsession with simplicity that really struck me as kind of quite interesting. And what was also fascinating is it sort of didn't apply to marketing, really. So when I was interviewed, I was told we had a marketing team of 50 people. So on my first day, I held a team meeting, and 8 turned up, and 3 of those told me that they didn't think they should have been there. And it sort of describes the problem, really, that we had activities scattered across the organisation, that the contact centre was run in one place, digital was run somewhere else. I'm still not entirely sure where Marcoms was run by, but that seemed to be happening in lots of different ways. So the first task was to bring it all together, and in doing that, what we wanted to do is to really focus everybody on a very simple strategy. So even before I joined, Carolyn and I ran a 2-day workshop with the airline management board to actually focus on what was easyJet all about, what was our proposition. And this stuff sort of feels quite obvious now, but I promise you 4 years ago it wasn't. And we came up with the conclusion that we wanted to make travel easy and affordable. We'd always been about affordability, but us and the airline industry generally, but probably the low-cost sector of the airline industry hadn't made travel easy for customers. So that was quite a big organisational stretch from where we were. We'd started off many years ago, 20 years ago, actually being very much on the customer's side. We actually democratized air travel by making it so affordable for people. And yet the industry had begun to do things which customers just really didn't find very customer friendly. So we wanted to go back to being on the customer's side. And clearly we all fly these same planes. These sort of metal tubes go up in the sky. They're all Airbuses, they're all Boeing. So it's actually the people on them that kind of make a difference, really. And we wanted to have a very, very simple ambition that everybody across the organisation could begin to understand and refer to constantly, and that's simply to become Europe's preferred short-haul airline delivering market-leading returns. So we established this with the airline management board, and we've been just relentlessly boring at just communicating that for the last 4 years. I hope that anybody you meet at easyJet could repeat those very simple phrases to you. I'm absolutely sure they could, because it really is what we're all about. And then, as I said, the organisation was scattered, and so what we did was to try and bring that together in one group. Actually, my friend Michael from BCCP has done some slides for me this evening. You can probably tell his versus mine. So he went to Oxford. He's an intellectual, so this is one of his. It's beautiful. I'm a comp Scouser boy, so I'm not entirely sure who Chopin is. But anyway, apparently it's the final achievement. But what we did is we kind of brought it together into sort of into one location, and just to focus on some things there. And I know they're sort of really obvious, but we weren't doing it. You know, we've got one marketing budget because I feel passionate that you need to be able to move money around from digital into broadcast, from broadcast into contact centres, from contact centres into France, from France into where you need to be able to be fluid about where your money is spent, and it needs to actually really follow effectiveness. So we had one marketing budget, we had one set of metrics. I use the example of France. We were great in France. Our CRM program, we mailed customers once a month, and we had a 30-day window for response. So if any previous customer bought a flight, we said, fantastic, that's down to the email program. And then we bought a whole load of digital stuff kind of separately. We actually just swamped the digital media space with easyJet advertising. And we had the same 30-day cookie window. So we then recounted those customers kind of a second time, really. So it was glorious. Everybody loved it. The marketing manager was a huge success. The digital media agency thought they were fantastic. The CRM agency, everyone was on fire. And of course, it was an absolute nonsense. The incrementality around it was next to zero. So we concentrated into two big agencies, all the creative work through VCCP, all the media work through OMD, and we had really, really clear accountabilities internally in terms of who was going to begin to do things. And I call that the marketing model that we follow. Once upon a time in a previous life, I worked at Barclays, and I'm only very conscious of what I never really achieved in that organisation. I don't know if any of you are Barclays customers, but if you go and use their online banking site, I did online banking at Barclays, there's still a different online banking site to a Barclaycard site to a Barclays stockbroker site. And they'll look at you and they'll tell you they're very, very separate brands. But as a customer who has all those three things, you can't see them all in one place. It's absolutely maddening. It's all their stuff rather than our stuff as a customer. So by having a very simple organisation where one person's responsible for CRM, one person's responsible for digital, right across Europe, we've standardised it and we've just kind of cut through all of that nonsense, really. Once we'd sort of done that, we went through simplification on the outside. I won't talk a lot about the creative work, but this is where our friends, the geniuses at VCCP, really began to help nail exactly what that proposition was, Europe by easyJet, and just had a campaign that looks consistent right across Europe. And we translate or transcreate where we need to, and we have just small local agencies if we need to do something specific. So it really does feel a very simple and a very consistent campaign. And again, we're just very repetitive. We don't have big media budgets, so we have to keep on saying the same thing. But in talking about that, I do want to talk about the client-agency relationship, because we are a very small team. So there's about 60 people in marketing, and we do all the brand and the marcoms across Europe, the CRM, the digital development. We run the contact centres in Mumbai and Krakow. We do our in-flight business, which is kind of bigger than Jack Wills. We do our business proposition, we do our ancillaries, so we're about 30% of our revenue. So there's not very many people doing a lot of stuff, really. So we can't kind of get into doing the agency's job. So the deal with VCCP, the deal with OMD is we sort of just let them crack on and do it. So there's a brief that we kind of agree together. Nobody goes to shoots, nobody kind of oversees their work. If it's kind of fit for purpose, they co-own the brand with us, and we kind of let that fly. We don't try to do each other's jobs. And I think that creates a great and a trusting relationship. We would absolutely trust them with their point of view on this brand more than anybody internally to some degree. And so we just have very, very clear accountabilities between the two, and it's worked really, really successfully for us. There's something about simplicity being a customer right. And so I think easyJet and many other airlines like it made it really complicated for customers. We had all sorts of rules, which if you have the temerity not to kind of read in detail, we would just trip you up and you would end up paying a lot more money. So you go through the whole buying process and then we'd add a booking fee at the end. Customers absolutely hated it. My favourite was always the second bag fee. You could buy a second bag, but it didn't qualify you for any weight in the second bag. It was the same price as the first bag, which was 20 kilos, but the second bag, you just had to share the stuff. Why would a customer ever know that? And what that does is it just destroys trust. But what I found was that if you're really wanting simplicity, this is where it kind of really shows, because it's actually really hard to deliver some of this organisational change and to begin to take on some of these big challenges across the organisation, to begin to do things very, very differently. So I think customers want simplicity. I think they're going to demand simplicity. And I think as marketeers, we have to begin to make that happen. Unlike Paddy Power, marketing for us isn't a stunt, and I don't mean that negatively because the work you do is absolutely fantastic, but we are trying to do things that are sort of a win-win for customers, and I use this Inspire Me, it's a terrible picture of it as a good example. One of the things I noticed pretty early on was that lots of customers were starting at London, Gatwick or Milan, and they were looking for different places they could go to for a certain price. So how can we just sort it and show customers where they can go to for 50 quid, where they can go to for 70 quid, where they can go to for Sun, really, really simply. We've got something called the low cost finder. So one of the things that you want when you book with us is you want to know how cheap it is. So what's the cheapest day across the course of the month? What are the cheapest flights on that day? And how do we just begin to enable customers to begin to access information much more easily? So in making it simple, we're just trying to come up with simple tools which do what customers want to do. And as marketeers, we really begin to deliver that. Simplicity sometimes is just about catching up. One of the things that I think probably in the last 3 years most people have noticed we've done is allocated seating. There was a rule of thumb that, or there was a thought internally that the fastest way to begin to fill a plane, and our planes are only on the ground for 25 minutes in between flights, was to just get customers to go and sit in the first seat that was available. But people hated it, and lots of you have probably been in that experience. They just didn't like the rush for the plane at all. So we moved to an allocated seating system. What we had to demonstrate is we could still turn the planes just as fast, because if those gaps in the day got bigger, then we couldn't fly as many flights in a day, and that would reduce overall profitability of the airline. And so it was a massive deal for us. It went on for ages, and we trialed it, and it seemed to the rest of the world to be common sense, but we really had to begin to demonstrate it worked. And on the first day I was down at Gatwick, and I said to customer, so what do you think? Expecting some sort of reaction, and they just said, well, you've just caught up with everybody else, haven't you? It's how every other airline works, and we just want you to do the same thing. And it was one of those very leveling moments, really, where internally we become obsessed about it, and actually for the customer, it was just straightforward common sense. Why wouldn't we do that? And it's been transformational for us. There's something about the simplicity of the easyJet organisation that I now find very attractive after 4 years. I'm not sure how I would transition to other organisations, because we are sort of status-free, really. And this is a video we make and show from time to time for our investor community. We went out, I did an investor trip to the States, and we made this to sort of just give them a feel for what it's like. It's deliberately crap. It's kind of anti-marketing, really. So the supermarket muzak is to kind of just communicate what it is. VCCP had nothing to do with it, they would like me to say. So if we could just play it. So this is very easyJet. It's an old hangar. It's kind of like a B&Q shed with all the merchandising taken out. So there are no plants, there are no water butts, because someone would have to water the plants, because why can't you just use a tap? We all buy our own stationery. We all sit on open plan offices. It's the same place where we're servicing our planes. It's also our crew room. So if you go and compare that with lots of other airline head offices, which are big corporate edifices, it's a very, very different thing. And it's a sort of status-free zone, which ultimately becomes liberating, because you can really begin to focus on what matters in terms of getting close to the customers and delivering what they need on a day-to-day basis. And I guess that's oh, this is very good, Michael. You have to tell me what this one is later. Ultimately, I think this simplicity, this marketing simplicity, really gives back to the rest of the organisation. And so when we can begin to say this is exactly what the customer experience needs to be at every point in the process, then the operations team can then begin to understand what it is they need to begin to deliver. And when things start to go wrong, we've established a common language right across everyone, which is the language we'd be happy to use on the outside of the organisation. So there's a very tight link between what we say on the outside and what we say on the inside. I hope that if any of our internal communication got out, you would recognise it and you would think it was entirely consistent with what we say. The language is absolutely the same. And I just look at our sort of research programme as an example of that now. So we have our customer journey. Everybody calls those stages the same thing. If something kind of goes wrong, it's very clear what we need to do and where those accountabilities sit. So from a research program, we can say who in the operations team is responsible for fixing the thing that's gone wrong. So it isn't really a marketing team, it's sort of fully integrated in terms of what everything does. So this is very grandiose. This isn't easyJet at all, but Colin Powell, I just think at the end, we were just having a chat. I think the role of marketeers increasingly needs to be the simplifiers within the organisation. We're lucky enough that we are close to our customers, close to our insight to begin to understand what they're really, really looking for. And it's our job, I think, to kind of go out there and work with our colleagues to say, how do we keep it simple? How do we keep it customer focused? And in this very complex world where customers are bombarded with multiple messages, how do we actually genuinely cut through, not necessarily in a media way, but in a complete proposition way? And I think in doing that, that's where marketing can then add the most commercial value, because as you simplify and as you become relevant and you focus on the things that make a difference, I think that in turn drives the commercial return. And I think that's been the easyJet story over the last 4 years. We've really focused on the things that mattered, and as a consequence, more people are flying us, they're paying higher prices to fly with us, and we're driving greater shareholder return as a result of just providing a better service overall. Thank you.